Hey guys, welcome to the Lean to the Left podcast. Today we're talking politics, and with me are my political pals, Arthur Hill from North Carolina and Robert Thompson from Georgia, plus a special guest, Michael McDonald from Florida. Arthur is communications chair of the Brunswick County, North Carolina Democratic Party. He and I both worked in PR and as freelance writers in Washington, D.C., and we both also worked on Capitol Hill at one point or another. Robert Thompson is based in Atlanta, and he founded Peach News Now in its opinion podcast, Goddamn Liberals. It's an awesome podcast, and let me tell you, he takes no prisoners. Michael McDonald is a nationally recognized expert on elections and national politics and author of the new book, From Pandemic to Insurrection, Voting in the 2020 U.S. Presidential Election. Michael's professor of political science at the University of Florida and a leading resource on American elections. His website, electproject.org, disseminates election statistics and is widely used as an authoritative source by media, scholars, and others. Michael was a guest on the Lean to the Left podcast a couple months ago, which is why I conned him into joining us today. So welcome, guys, and welcome, Michael. Thanks for joining us, pal.
Great to be with you guys.
It's getting interesting here in South Carolina, where we have this little-known state representative, Crystal Matthews, challenging U.S. Senator Tim Scott. Scott is virtually ignoring Matthews, who seems to be pretty much self-destructing, and largely it's because of her big mouth. In fact, Scott's running a TV ad blasting the state's Democratic candidate for governor, Joe Cunningham, ignoring Matthews entirely, tying Cunningham in with Joe Biden and Nancy Pelosi. The ad closes with a line, "Say no to Joe," both of them, which tells us something, which is that he's certainly laying the groundwork for a presidential run in 2024. Last month, Matthews faced calls from some Democrats to fold her campaign following publication of leaked audio in which she appears to make disparaging remarks about the white voters she represents. She was recorded as saying, I keep them right here, like under my thumbs. Otherwise, they get out of control like kids." Matthews admitted that it was her voice on the recording, which was released by Project Veritas, a conservative activist group. She dismissed them as satirical, MAGA-powered news outlet. This was the second Matthews revealed by Project Veritas. The first was when she was recorded speaking to an inmate about funding her campaign with, quote, dope boy money and having Democrats run as secret sleeper Republicans. Prediction, Matthews goes down big. Then, of course, there is the Cunningham challenge to McMaster, the good old boy governor who has been in politics, according to Cunningham, longer than I've been alive. Cunningham says he'll do away with the state income tax, legalize recreational marijuana, as well as sports betting, making it possible for South Carolinians to bet on sports through mobile apps and brick and mortar locations throughout the state. It's part of his freedom package, which also includes supporting reproductive rights and a woman's right to decide whether to have an abortion without state interference. Now, Foghorn McMaster wants to ban abortions in nearly every instance. His ads claim credit for keeping South Carolina open during the pandemic, thus saving jobs. Never mind that businesses were rescued by the federal government, not McMaster. Prediction, McMaster wins, but more narrowly than in the past. Now, there are some interesting local races here for the state legislature and a Democratic challenge for U.S. House District 7 seat, currently held by Representative Tom Rice, who voted to impeach Trump and was soundly trounced by a right-wing Trump backer in the primary. I expect that Republican, Russell Fry, to easily win that seat. Now, what's happening in your states, guys? How about you, Michael? What's going on with the craziness there with DeSantis, Rubio, and company?
Lots of different things are going on. DeSantis has over $100 million in his war chest. So it seems most likely that he's going to win the election for governor. The Senate election is closer in the polls. And there was a very contentious debate just a couple of days ago. It's possible that Demings may have a surprise against Rubio. I think it's closer. The polls have just a slight Rubio lead. And there's some things going on in the election that might help out the Democrats here if it really is going to be a very close election. One is the hurricane came through and really hit hard a Republican area of the state, Southwest Florida. And I can see in the early voting data returns from that area so far, they're certainly lagging behind the rest of the state. So it may be that there'll be depressed turnout. We saw that happen with Hurricane Michael a few years ago. And since Hurricane Michael came in and hit another red part of the state, but it's fairly sparsely populated. It's not like Fort Myers. And so we'll just have to watch and see if there's a depressed turnout in that southwest part of the state. The other thing that's going on, at least with respect to the early vote, is that Florida has, or used to have, it still has, but it goes away after 2022, a law which says that if you request a mail ballot, that request is good through 2 federal general elections. And so anyone who requested a mail ballot in 2018 or 2020, they are getting a mail ballot now. And of course, Democrats were voting in mass by mail in 2020. The Democrats right now have a 500,000 mail ballot request lead out there over the Republicans in Florida. And the challenge will be for the Democrats to convert those into votes. If they can do that, and there's good evidence to suggest that mail balloting increased turnout. So if they can do that, then who knows? If it gets real close, there might be enough juice there to get the Democrats over the hump in that Senate election.
Do you really think that Demings has a shot against Rubio?
The polls have him close. It's a head scratcher, and she looked pretty good in the debate. She looked like she was just taking Rubio out to the woodshed in the debate. There were some really choice moments from that debate that are worth watching. She was a law enforcement. They can't go after her on being weak on crime, and if anything, like she's attacking Rubio back on these sorts of things. I don't know. Stranger things have happened. Again, if I were betting on the election, which I don't bet on any of these things, but if I were, I'd probably put my money on Rubio, but I don't think that's a sure bet.
Is she running for her House seat at the same time?
She's not.
Okay. Do you know anything about that race? Will the Democrats be able to keep that seat?
Oh, yeah, that seat's a very solid Democratic seat. Republicans, when they were gerrymandering up the state, they made that seat a sink for Republican votes. It's really Stephanie Murphy's seat, which is just to the north of it, and that is the one that could have been a close race for the Democrats. I haven't seen much in terms of polling or anything really in terms of polling out of that race, but Stephanie Murphy decided that she wasn't going to run for re-election, and that's going to make it hard for the Democrats to retain that control of that particular state.
Yeah, I was going to thank Val Demings for actually showing a real badge on Twitter the other day, because Herschel Walker likes to ride around with his fake Fisher Price badge and claim that he worked with law enforcement. So props out to Val for doing that.
I was on this app, this memes app, and they have pictures that you can use for doing memes. And that picture of Herschel Walker holding up that badge has made it to their standard pictures that you can use, which I thought was pretty good. Oh man.
The problem with that, though, is the Republicans are eating all that up and they love it. They're just basically a bunch of cowboys. And even though he was not permitted to have a prop, this is, again, what we're talking about, unfortunately, instead of the real issues.
People are voting in Georgia. We've had, as we're talking at this moment, we've had 2 days of in-person early voting under our belt. And both days are records for a midterm election in terms of the number of people who voted. Now, there's a lot else going on here because Georgia Republicans also made it harder for people to vote a mail ballot. So it's pretty clear to me the mail ballot numbers are depressed from comparing back to, say, 2018. Some of what's going on right now is people probably who wanted to vote a mail ballot are voting in person because it's difficult to get the mail ballot. But even then, if you lump together the mail ballots and the in-person early votes together, we're still well above the 2018 level. And there could be some residual reverberations that are happening because of the 2020 election and where people were voting early more often in that election. So maybe some of that's going on, but it just makes sense. that people would be voting in that election. It's the most expensive Senate election. Control for the Senate could be up for grabs. And you got an interesting character in Herschel Walker. And when you've got all of those things together, lots of money, lots of interest, a candidate who himself is controversial, that's going to gin up turnout. And so to me, it's not surprising to see these eye-popping numbers of people who have voted so far. But what I think is, if it can continue through to Election Day, while Georgia doesn't have party registration, they do have race on the voter file. And we can see that so far the early voters are 35% African American. And in prior elections, they were only 30% or lower. So they're reaching the metric threshold of what they need, Warnock's campaign, and maybe even Abrams for that matter, if those numbers persisted all the way through to Election Day. I don't think that's going to happen. I think that we're going to see more white voters get into the mix as we get closer to Election Day. But right now, at least the Democrats are sitting pretty in Georgia. They got to like what they're seeing. It's just going to be, can they keep that enthusiasm going through to Election Day?
Yeah,
Hey,
agreed.
Robert,
And one question that I saw the other day in Florida, this whole felon voting issue, and these cops, I'll put in air quotes, going around and serving warrants, but they didn't really know what the warrants were that they were serving. So what's the latest that you're hearing about the felon voting?
It's just really sad that people who thought they were doing their civic duty, they wanted to get engaged back in public life after they had been released from prison, and they thought they had done everything that they needed to do to have their rights restored. It turns out, well, Florida doesn't make it easy. And they probably make it intentionally difficult. There's no way for someone who's been a felon to look up to see if they've really paid off all their fines, fees, and restitution, which is the legislature requires in order for people to regain their rights. And without that ability for people to even look that up, election officials can't look it up. So when a felon submits a voter registration form, there's no way for the election officials to verify whether or not the felon is eligible. So the election officials went ahead and registered these people. And in case one of these election officials, by the way, he is now the leader of this election police force that DeSantis has. So he was, in a way, entrapping people because he was registering them to vote. And now he's coming back and leading the effort to arrest these people for the thing of him enabling them to commit the crime. It's just a sad situation. And it's not the first time we've seen this. Voting while black is a problem we see across the country. And there's Crystal Mason in Texas who cast a provisional ballot. She wasn't sure if she was eligible or not. So she cast a provisional ballot, and it turned out she wasn't. The ballot never counted. So she didn't even vote. But she's been in prison, 5-year term sentence in prison for casting that provisional ballot. It's just not right when people are, trying to get back on their feet, getting back into society, and we make it really difficult and we want to punish them. These are not people intending to try to throw the election to Biden in Florida. These were just people who wanted to participate and get back into normal life.
they've already paid their debt. Why should they have to pay it?
They're going to have to. They got arrested. They had to be taken in for going to jail and booked. So in some ways, they're already paying a penalty yet again for a crime that, again, we should forgive this. And I'll just say one other thing about this, because if you really care, maybe there are Republicans that listen to you, but if you were a Republican saying, no, they did something wrong, they committed a felony, they need to be punished for that. If you really believe that, guess what? You should have Donald Trump in prison because he committed a Florida felony when he signed a voter registration form that listed the White House as his address. Now, that's not a Florida residence. And that's what he claimed to be his residence. And he signed it saying, under penalty of perjury, everything is true on this form. And it wasn't. He was not a Florida resident, according to him. He submitted another application where he said, oh yeah, no, Mar-a-Lago is actually where my residence is. But he submitted that form. It was a felony. I'm not saying throw Donald Trump in prison, at least for that. But if you're not going to throw Donald Trump in prison for making an honest mistake and having intention of voting, I don't think you should be doing it to these other people either.
That's a good.
He lives up in New Jersey during the summer anyway.
Yeah. He's not even supposed to be living at Mar-a-Lago. That's the other whole thing about it. When he bought the place, he said he signed, there's a lawsuit and other things that said that he wouldn't call it his residence. So people down in Palm Beach will tell you that he's not even supposed to be living there.
We're hoping that we're going to find him a jail cell in Georgia soon. So
He doesn't pay attention. They also legal anyway. So what's going on with you, Arthur?
We're excited up here in my little corner of North Carolina, southeastern North Carolina. We found out this morning that Sherry Beasley, who is virtually in a deadlock with Ted Budd for the U.S. Senate, is going to be making her second visit to Brunswick County. Now, the thing that's about this is she's pledged to visit each of the 100 counties in North Carolina during the campaign, and she's already done that. And now she's going around for round two, and she's making her second visit to Brunswick County, and we're gonna have her. So she's got the Cape Fear River to her back, and she's going to talk about the environmental record of Ted Budd, who supports chemical companies in North Carolina that have poisoned the Cape Fear, and it's going to be a great backdrop, and so we're excited about that. But she's running a very good campaign across the state. And it is last week she was ahead in some of the polls. And this week, Bud is 1 or 2 points ahead in some other polls, but it's all within the margin of error. And so I think visiting Brunswick County, where she had a great turnout the last time she was here, and we're going to marshal up another nice turnout for her while she's here next week. So we're excited about that. And that's what's been keeping me busy for the last few weeks, that and some of the other local campaigns. Got a pretty good campaign going against David Rouser, who's the 7th Congressional District U.S. Congressman. All you need to know about him is that he was a former legislative assistant for Jesse Helms, and he's running for his 5th term. And we have a really good candidate, Charles Graham, running against him. And he is from Robeson County, which is north of here. And he's the only Democrat, the only elected Democrat in the county. So the folks up there like him, and we're hoping the same thing will be true of the other counties that make up the gerrymandered 7th district. And that's those are the main headlines events in my life as far as North Carolina is concerned.
Okay. So, Robert, tell me what else is happening in Georgia.
Everybody knew that Herschel Walker was a spectacle at his debate that he actually called in Savannah, but there was a second debate he decided to skip. Now, this strategy is hit and miss across the U.S. with these Republicans, knowing that they're going to be asked tough questions, so they just skip debates. It's an interesting strategy. I was going to, Michael, if you had any other examples of this strategy of skipping a debate because you know the questions are going to be too tough. But he can show you his fake badge, right?
We have a situation here in South Carolina too, because McMaster has been dodging Cunningham's request for a debate. So Cunningham went to some kind of a poultry farm the other day, or some kind of a livestock farm, picked up a chicken and said that McMaster was chicken for not debating him. And so now McChicken is going all over Twitter in South Carolina. It's doing pretty well.
Well, is there some kind of national Republican strategy not to engage in debates? This is happening not just in our states, but all over the country, that they don't want to debate. And it doesn't make any difference whether they're incumbents. They just don't want to debate. Is there anything going on there? Is there a national strategy to avoid it?
I mean, I'm going to both sides it just for a second. Also, there's Katie Hobbs out in Arizona who's refusing to debate as well. So here's the thing. When do you decide not to debate? It's when you have a lead. You think that you're going to win the election. It usually is what people do. And I doubt that Herschel Walker's campaign believes that he's going to win. So there's probably something else that's going on there. And likely they just don't want to have their candidate make an embarrassment out of himself on the debate stage again. That's a different sort of strategy. But for the most part, yeah, if you're in the lead, you don't want to make a mistake. You don't want something to go viral and make a meme out of it, like Walker's badge. That you want to try to avoid that. And the easiest way to do that is just to not debate if you don't have to.
And the strategy failed for David Perdue. He was a 2-time senator here in Georgia. He never held a town hall. He actually went on the record and said, quote, "Town halls are not my style." And he lost his seat to John Ossoff, that is in for 6 years. So I feel like Georgia is a bit more picky with these candidates. I mean, obviously, we were pivotal in this narrow margin that we have in the Senate with our 2 senators. So it'll be interesting to see. My other concern is about Stacy Abrams. Stacy Abrams, I'm going to go on record and say she is more well known outside of Georgia than inside of Georgia. I have been to California and other places, and people love Stacy Abrams. And the Republicans are trying to use that she is the celebrity governor or what have you. Her debate performance was amazing the other night. I listened to a couple of sound bites from that. She called Kemp pretty much on everything that he was trying to claim. The one key thing here in Georgia is this Medicaid expansion. Kemp was trying to claim that there are more people than ever in Georgia on Medicaid. Yes, because of the pandemic. And that's all about to end. There are commercials running in Georgia right now that those are on Medicaid to make sure that you update your information, because that's all about to get pulled out from the rug up under you. Abrams was very key to say that. We've also had Atlanta, the city of Metro Atlanta. We actually had only 2 trauma hospitals. One of those is closed, and their emergency services ended last week. So we are down to 1 trauma hospital under this Kemp and Republican administration in Georgia. It literally has life and death consequences for these decisions that Republicans are making.
We have a Medicaid issue in North Carolina too. The legislature here has refused to accept expanded Medicaid from the federal government. And although there seems to be a bit of a change of heart, some of the Republican leaders in the state legislature put up a bill authorizing expanded Medicaid coverage, but they couldn't even get the support of their own caucus to get the bill through the legislature. That's become a big issue, Democrats versus Republicans in North Carolina. And I guess it's all, they hate Obamacare, so they don't want to do anything to encourage or broaden Obamacare in the state of North Carolina, which is a shame.
Same exact things happening in South Carolina too. It's the same thing. Michael, I wanted to ask you, I know you have to leave soon. Have you got a prediction as to what will happen with the House?
We're ways away, but again, if I were a betting person at this point, again, I'm not, I think the Democrats are going to retain control of the Senate and they'll lose control of the House. That's the most likely outcome. It's going to be very narrow. An event between now and today could easily upset that balance, and you just never know what could happen. You could have any sorts of surprises that happen between now and November. But right now, I think that's the most likely outcome for the election.
Okay. Anybody else have some thoughts about that?
Yeah, I think Michael's right.
Yeah, and that's the big wild card at this point, because all this could change. Look, if we have a record turnout for a midterm, which is at least for a modern election, 2018 was the highest turnout since 2014. So it was an exceptionally high turnout election. I think we're going to beat that election. And a lot of what people are predicating their assumptions about the election are on polls that some of them, they have wide variation on their likely voter models. Some of them think we're going to have a low turnout election, and some think we're going to have a high turnout. And those low turnout likely voter models, they tend to favor the Republicans more than the high turnout ones. So if we really do get something really exceptional and the pollsters are just all wrong on turnout, that could really change things. 2-3 weeks from now, we're going to have a better picture as to where the election stands. And it could be that everybody's assumptions are just simply wrong about this election, that we're underestimating the sort of anger and angst that's out there in the electorate. We could see a very high turnout election.
Yeah, North Carolina starts early voting tomorrow. So it's going to be interesting to see what happens in terms of people going to vote. Mail-in ballots starting tomorrow is going to be very interesting.
Yeah, I agree. I follow this stuff very closely. I'll plug myself, electproject.org, and then my Twitter's at electproject, and I've got a book about the 2020 election, but a lot of that is carrying over to today. So it's from pandemic to insurrection, voting in the 2020 U.S. presidential election. Get that book. It's cheap on Kindle and electronic version. I really encourage people to do it. And if you follow along, you're going to follow along with a lot of other people, because I get like 1 million hits on my website. Crazy. So it's going to be a very crazy ride for the next month.
Thank you very much, Michael. I know you have to leave, but I do appreciate you joining us on our little Dixie Dems show that we do every month. And good luck.
Well, great to be with you guys, and y'all take care. I'm going to be heading off. I got to do yet another interview, so it just never ends for me.
All right.
Good luck. Good luck.
Bye.
Nice to see you.
There you go. So we had our influx from Florida and the national perspective.
Did you guys see that the Rubio debate?
I didn't see it, no, but I read a good bit about it from the Washington Post.
Rubio was frenetic. He needs to take his pills. I thought, I did. Did you see it, Robert? Did you see any of it? He was just hyper. He was hyper, and they asked him, will he accept the results of the election even if he loses?
Yeah.
And he had about a 5-minute answer, and it took him until the end of 5 minutes with arms waving and everything else to say, yes, he would accept the results.
Yeah,
But
didn't go on and on about how Florida has a great election law and he trusts the Florida election law.
yeah, he did. They spent a lot of time talking about that. It was just extraordinary. And then through the whole thing, they had the split screen thing with Ellen, and she was just smirking. She was just smirking through the whole thing. She's got a great smirk.
Maybe Rubio has been spending too much time at Mar-a-Lago because there tend to be some alleged recreational drugs being doled out at Mar-a-Lago.
Why am I not surprised?
I did not catch that debate. I've been on the road for a couple of days, but yeah, it doesn't surprise me
It was very
to be, and you've seen all of these retirements from the Republican Party. That they're abandoning the sinking ship with a bunch of wacko people on board.
Yeah, I remember in another day, decades ago, when I was working on the Hill, there was a group of Republicans called the Wednesday Group. And you remember them? Do you remember them?
Sure.
I recall that because they'd get together, and it was the moderate wing of the Republican Party at that time, and it was about half the Republican caucus, and they'd have lunch every Wednesday, and they'd talk about what they want to do on issues, and it was an interesting group. They held the balance of power in the Senate at that point, but not anymore.
No, not anymore. Yeah. One of the guys I worked for, in the first guy I worked for on the Hill was a Republican, and he belonged to the Wednesday Group. But that was a tough thing. I had to switch. He sent me to stand in for him at a debate before a bunch of seniors and a bunch of retired people. And the issue of the day was whether or not there would be a Social Security pay increase. And the Republican position was no, that it would cause inflation to increase. And so I had to argue that position on his behalf before these old people like me now. Yeah. And I gave the Republican position, and somebody stood up and said, well, what do you think? And how do you feel? And I said, I'm not here to talk about me. I'm not running. The guy I work for is running, and this is his position. And so the guy that was running against him, his name was Charlie Yates. He was a young millionaire, very attractive, very well spoken. Should have been the congressman, in my opinion. Anyway, afterwards, he said to me, hey, if I win, you want a job? I said, hell yeah, I'll do that.
Did he win?
No, the guy I worked for, Ed Forsyth, he won. Oh. But I quit after that, shortly after that, and went to work for Jim Florio, who ended up becoming governor of New Jersey. Sadly, he just passed away a couple of weeks ago.
Yeah.
At a fairly advanced age.
So we got a pretty big Social Security increase coming up in a couple of months.
Yeah, that'll be a good thing.
Yeah.
But the Republicans are going to complain it's going to affect inflation.
I'm surprised they haven't yet.
I am too. Of course. They'll wait till the election's over.
The one thing that Social Security and Medicare do not have going for them is they don't really have the lobbyists with money. The only group that I can think of that pushes for Social Security and Medicare is AARP. There is a pundit in Georgia that has called the AARP a radical extreme organization. If we are in a day and time that AARP is a radical organization, that's sad, versus what you've got with these military contract lobbyists and all these other special interests, oil and gas industry. Right. They're the ones that are pouring money into the lobbyists and all of these elections. We need to find good lobbyists for Social Security and Medicare. My mother is an example. She is on Social Security right now. She's about to get a raise, but she's probably going to go to the ballot box and vote Republican. I can't get it.
Belled her in the head, man. Geez, flip. You can't do that. Yeah. Wow.
Maybe you could get her to vote absentee and then fill in her ballot.
That's it.
No, then Kim's going to lock me up. And, I can't do voter fraud.
That's true.
You got anything else, Arthur?
Nope, I'm excited about. I'll give you a report on Beasley next time. Next time we'll know, right?
Yeah.
Next time.
All right.
Yeah.
Next time we'll know what all this,
We'll have lots to talk about. Yeah.
whether we have something to moan and groan about or something to be happy about. All right, guys. All
We'll see you next time.
right. Take care.